What is your data strategy? What does data strategy mean to you? How did you do your strategic design? Did you base your data strategy on your position, a specific methodology maybe? Or did you base it on a tapestry of various variables where you could easily shrug your shoulders and say, it all depends? You see, the best data strategies focus on people and how these people invest in other people, how these people invest in infrastructure, and how these people invest in the right things so the company makes more money. But when we have the data strategy conversation and talk about strategic design, there's always a tendency to get right off track. We tend to focus a lot on the isms, on the positions, on the perspectives, the unique perspectives of the people within the conversation. And if we don't stop these conversations, the data strategies end up being too positioned, too political, too inflexible. And this inflexibility really undermines the purpose of the data strategy. We want to make more money. We want to change strategically. To do this, we have to closely manage, really closely manage, how the data strategy conversation is framed and how the data strategy conversation progresses. We have to be very cautious about who is invited to the conversation and how these people contribute. Because the effectiveness of a big data strategy is not just information collection from the right people. An effective data strategy comes from the nature of the conversation. I'm Chris Bahura, and welcome to my channel, Breaking Status Quo. Today, I'm going to walk through the type of conversations you need to have to establish a good data strategy. Conversations to establish a data-driven organization. Conversations to frame big data. I can't go into deep detail into everything, but I will go into detail on some of the aspects of the data strategy conversation that are the most crucial. Ready? Let's take a peek into the conversations people are currently having about data strategies. The conversations are around data and the business value of that data. How you get that business value through specific insights and leveraging big data technologies. And there's usually some discussion around predictive models. I don't like these sort of conversations. It is requiring a lot of people to take a conceptual leap that data has business value. And a lot of people cannot make this conceptual leap. Rather than talking about the true business value of data, people talk about how big data technologies can replace existing infrastructure. Rather than being a data conversation, the conversation turns into a technology conversation. And this really railroads the data strategy conversation we need to have. I do not have a problem with the technology conversation. We need to have that conversation. What I have a problem with is that people are passing off the technology conversation as the data strategy. And that's not the case. I feel that's borderline fraud, that it's borderline on a scam. Data strategies focus on data. Technology, especially big data technology, are solutions that support data strategy. We can't just go straight out and have the data has business value conversation. That's a major conceptual leap. We're not designed to think or even talk that way. It's better to stretch the conversation out and reinforce and scaffold the data strategy conversation around previous and existing conversations that we've already had. So keeping that in mind, let's reframe and reposition what we see here right now. Here's business value. What does business value really mean? It has a very nebulous definition, but it's much easier to answer who's really in charge of business value, who makes the decision that something has value for the business. It's corporate management and it's corporate governance. So let's change business value to corporate management and governance. Now, what do corporate management and governance really care about? They care about assets. They care about investing in the right assets, the right capital. So let's change data to data assets and change big data technologies to technology assets. Now, doesn't this conversation, the nature of this conversation, look different? There's aspects of politics, investment, and authorities that need to be discussed. Let's widen the scope of predictive models to forecasting and predictive models. And let's also widen the scope of data insights to be anything involving data-driven. Now, I like the nature of this conversation. I like it because it opens the door to several other conversations around priority, the valuation of data assets, and how we incorporate revenue and revenue growth. This conversation also sets the foundation for what data-driven really means. That data-driven is more than evidence, that it's more than facts and measurements. Data-driven has a strong predictive forecasting aspect to it, an aspect that drives innovation and revenue growth. Let's clean up our picture. Let's separate corporate management from corporate governance and forecasting from predictive models. Now, it's not much of a conceptual leap to say that this data strategy conversation is a strategic change conversation. Let's step back and look at this picture. This is a picture that I would use to drive strategic communications. This is a picture that I would use to present to executives and team leaders to get an idea of a data-driven strategy, a data-driven initiative. But there's not enough here to develop a good data strategy. We need to go deeper. Let's move data-driven to here, and then extend corporate governance into data governance. We want corporate people to talk about data in terms of their activities, policies, procedures, and regulations. Let's also group together the data and technology assets. Let's put capital at the top. Now I'm going to add three crucial components: organizational structure, strategies, and culture. And these components are really crucial because they change the very nature of the data strategy conversation. Organizational structure is the roles, responsibilities, and activities within the organization. Strategies include strategies that the data strategy is dependent upon, drives, or needs to be aligned with. And culture is the organizational culture and various cultural camps within the organization. Now, this is the picture I use to determine what deliverables need to be completed and who gets invited to the data strategy conversation. And from those two things, I also specify which conversations, especially the politically charged conversations, find their way into which deliverables, shifting political conversations into constructive conversations. And yes, politics can be reframed into a positive light. Let's look again at those three components: organizational structure, strategies, and culture. Look how they're listed on the page. Strategies and culture support organizational structure. These are the sort of conversations you want to have when you want to promote cost savings, cuts, and efficiencies. This is the picture you want to have if you have an operational-centric business model. And this is what the picture would look like if the organization plans to grow, either through merger and acquisition, or by hiring many boots on the ground, or expanding existing infrastructures. Now, if you want to have the data strategy conversation to be about innovation and revenue growth and move to a customer-centric business model, this is what the picture would look like. See how the picture has changed? See how the nature of the data strategy conversation has changed, and it can change pretty significantly based on the combination of those three blocks. To have an effective data strategy, I always promote that we discuss every possible combination that those blocks can be. By having all those conversations, we can build a very diverse and very effective data strategy. To further increase the effectiveness of the data strategy and have a deeper data strategy conversation, we can include conversations around human capital. And there are three main types that we really must talk about: executive, leadership, and production human capital. The executive human capital conversation is around the Chief Data Officer responsibilities, the CDO responsibilities. How does that fit within the executive team? How does that change the dynamic of the executive team? How does the office, the data office, impact the team? How can data assets become data capital? How can we make data a corporate priority? Now, moving to leadership human capital, how do we become stewards of the data? How do we acquire the right people and build the right talent pool? How do we establish the right culture? How do we transition from a traditional leadership to a data-driven one? And then there is production human capital, getting into the nitty-gritty on skill sets, talent pools, certifications, and which vendors we should use to do the heavy lifting. Now let's shift gears and look at data-driven. Data-driven is a big umbrella, so let's break it down. We hire executives because of their subject matter expertise. We support executives through analytics. We support analytics through models. We support these models through big data and big data solutions. And more often than not, we support big data solutions with BI, business intelligence, and traditional data solutions. This is as far as I'm going to go mapping out the nature of the data strategy conversation. I can go deeper, and I often do, because a lot of dollars hinge on the nature and outcomes of these conversations. What are your thoughts on the data strategy conversation? What are your thoughts on data strategy? Let's continue the conversation in the comments. Thanks for listening.